One of only 4 Maine state parks with camping and saltwater access, this campground also boasts an auto road to the top of Mount Battie with spectacular views of Casco Bay. It's also the only state park that's located along Maine's famous Route 1, where you can get lobster, view lighthouses, and catch a glimpse of Atlantic seals sunning themselves or peeking their heads above the harbor. And speaking of harbor seals, New England was home to 2 of the world's most famous. Stick around and I'll tell you all about them, along with what to expect from Camden Hills State Park Campground. Originally built as a Civilian Conservation Corps camp from 1935 to 1941, it was turned over to the state of Maine in 1947. Located along Route 1, just north of Camden's busy downtown area, the campground has 107 sites, with 44 of them having water and electric hookups. It encompasses 29 of the more than 5,700 acres of land making up the park. Site sizes range from small for a tent or pop-up under 20 feet to some sites able to accommodate RVs larger than 35 feet. The sizes are dispersed, but most of the smaller sites are in the upper area of the campground. All the sites include a picnic table and a fire pit. Although the park, along with the campground, are open year-round, the reservation system starts in February and ends in early September. The 2024 price for campsite is $25 for residents or $35 for non-residents per night. Water and electric sites are $35 for residents and $45 for non-residents. I recommend calling the campground in advance if you're planning to stay there during the off-season. I first met Hoover when I was working downtown Boston during the early 1980s. I was out to lunch with a coworker and he suggested we go see if we could get Hoover to talk to us. I wasn't quite sure what he meant, but we had an hour and it was just a short walk to the New England Aquarium. Sure enough, there was a crowd around and Hoover was demonstrating his ability to speak to the crowd.
Hello there, yourself. Hoover in the wintertime will leave about 12 to 18 pounds of fish. Hey, get out of here, yourself.
It was a little bit hard to understand, but clearly he was trying to entertain. Hoover had been an attraction since the early 70s. From Cuddy's Harbor along the coast of Maine, he'd been adopted by the Sparrow family as a young pup. They initially had difficulty getting him to bottle feed, but when offered solid food of ground fish, he sucked it up like a vacuum and earned his name. When he became too expensive to feed, they arranged for him to live at the New England Aquarium. Hoover delighted the crowds with his guttural, "Hello there," and "Get out of here." Although his repertoire was not huge, he became world famous as the only talking seal. When Hoover passed away in 1985, the Boston Globe and local news channels ran an obituary for the Boston celebrity. If you're finding this video entertaining, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up. Also, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to my channel, and be sure to include the bell to be alerted to new videos I put out each week. If you have any thoughts, put them in the comments section. I really like hearing from you. And you might consider sharing this video on your social media. It doesn't cost anything, and it really helps. Now let's get back to Camden Hills State Park Campground along the coast of Maine. Included as part of the campground site fee is access to the Mount Battie Auto Road. Built in 1965, the street is wide and well maintained as it climbs the 800 feet to the peak of the small mountain. Atop is a 26-foot tower memorializing Camden's World War I veterans, which offers a grand view of Casco Bay and the surrounding area. When I visited, the tower was undergoing a reconstruction project. Also included in the campground fee is access to the day use area, which is located across Route 1 down to Casco Bay itself. This includes a picnic pavilion designed by O. Hasted during the CCC time period, as well as several parking areas and picnic spaces with a view and also down by the shore. Known as the Lower Sagamore Village, it includes a shore walk and a small children's play area. The campground is broken into two sections, with the upper area being unsophisticated and geared towards tents, teardrops, and pop-ups. The lower area, having most of the electrical and water hookups, catering more towards larger camp trailers and motorhomes. The upper section is surrounded by an outside loop, which provides for an even more rustic and remote adventure, if so desired. Camden Hills State Park provides access to a number of hiking trails as well. These include climbing Mount Battie by foot, or hiking to the top of Mount Maguntacook at 1,385 feet. Longer hikes include Cameron, Baldrock, Derry, and Frohawk Mountains. There's a loop trail from the campground that encompasses both Mount Battie and Maguntacook, meaning Big Mountain Harbor, with a longer walk to the Maiden's Cliff Trail totaling 8.6 miles and is considered challenging. This stretch will lead to an overlook of Maguntacook Lake. Here you might be surprised to find a large white cross standing 24 feet high and 12 feet wide. This is a memorial to Eleanor French, a 12-year-old maiden. In May of 1864, Miss French was climbing the cliff with her sister and friends when a gust of wind blew her hat off, which she retrieved. As she sat to reaffix her headwear, apparently another gust of wind blew the girl off and down a 300-foot cliff. By all appearances, she was unharmed, but had undoubtedly sustained severe internal injuries and died that night. A number of crosses have been erected in her memory at the site for more than 160 years, with the current one having been set in place from the aid of helicopters provided by the Maine National Guard. There's also a shorter 2-mile hike from the parking lot at Barrett's Cove Beach along Maguntacook Lake. One of the excursions available from Camden is taking a day or overnight trip on an old schooner. These former working ships plow through Penobscot Bay, delighting tourists as they imagine what it was like when these vessels of sail were commonplace. Whether by pleasure craft, ferry, or harbor cruise, a day out on the briny sea is most likely going to encounter harbor seals lounging on the rocks. These aquatic creatures fascinate tourists and have been known to annoy mariners who make a living from the sea. The seal population is protected and growing in Maine, with each adult seal consuming between 11 to 15 pounds of seafood per day. The fishermen are concerned that their revenue source is literally being gobbled up. And the seals aren't finicky. They'll eat a variety of fish, squid, lobster, shrimp, or crab. They are excellent hunters. Harbor seals' large eyes give them excellent eyesight underwater, and although they appear to have no ears, their hearing is likewise extraordinary. One may see them swimming upside down. That's because they're scanning below for their next meal, and they can hold their breath for up to 25 minutes while doing so. Make no mistake, these cute animals are fierce predators. Each of the large mammals weighs between 250 to 300 pounds and lumbers around on land, but in the water, they're agile and even graceful. Their streamlined bodies allow them to move quickly through the water with speeds of up to 15 miles per hour. Although this is about half the speed of a common dolphin, curious seals have been known to swim alongside slower sailboats. That's not typical, however. They're naturally shy and keep their distance from humans in the wild, which is wise because up until federal intervention, humans were their most lethal adversary. This isn't to say that harbor seals don't have natural predators. These include fish such as sharks, including the great white, and sea mammals such as killer whales or orcas, and sea lions. While basking in the sun on land is no better, they must be wary of bears, wolves, coyotes, and even eagles will take newborn pups. They're not particularly social, preferring to be left alone, even when gathered on land in great numbers for safety. Of course, gathering in great numbers on land has the opposite effect in the water, which is why shark sightings have increased as the seal population has gone up. One does not go to the hardware store to fill the refrigerator. You go where the groceries are. Although not particularly social, seals can be very curious and relatively intelligent, say like a dog. This is why seals can be trained to perform tricks. They respond to positive feedback, such as receiving a treat for performing a certain feat. Most performance seals, such as those seen at aquariums, often have a dark past, usually involving being orphaned, abandoned, or injured, and it makes them unsuitable to return to the wild. However, once they've achieved some celebrity status, they're mostly content to entertain. Again, not unlike dogs, and it has actually earned them their nickname, sea dogs. Plus, they actually look a little like dogs as well, which is not surprising since they're distantly related. But so are bears, raccoons, skunks, otters, and dog-like animals such as wolves, coyotes, and foxes. Formerly identified as pinnipeds, they don't travel much and are non-migratory. Their thick layer of blubber allows them to remain in the cold Atlantic waters through the winters, waiting for the mating season to begin in the spring and continue through the fall. This timing allows all pups to be born in May or June the following year due to a process called delayed implantation, where the embryo remains suspended in the uterus until the conditions are appropriate. The Atlantic harbor seal, which is the variety I'm focusing on, resides along the east coast of the United States from around the Carolinas up through Canada and Greenland and along the Baltic Sea coasts. So you see, with a population covering such a huge area and the number of seals having been reduced to as low as 10% of its highest numbers due to being hunted as a nuisance before the U.S. passed the Marine Mammal Protection Act in 1970, Hoover was quite extraordinary, but not as famous as Andre, whose story I'll share in a moment. But first, let me tell you about the amenities of Camden Hills State Park Campground. The upper campsite area provided 3 unisex shower rooms, and I'm sure the lower area is similar, with the middle being handicapped accessible. These small spaces had some mildew forming on the walls, but were mostly clean. However, they could do with an upgrade. The showers are operated by pushing a button, which gives about 1.5 minutes of water. The temperature itself was warm, but by no means hot. However, it was possible to get clean, though not overly comfortable. A bench and hooks are provided outside of the shower stall itself, but there was no convenient place to hang a towel. Personally, I always use flip-flops when showering in a public facility like this so as to prevent things like athlete's foot. If I had to give a grade to the shower facilities, I think I'd probably give it a C. The restroom areas of the building are along the length, with the men's on one side and the women's on the other. There's 4 sinks with mirrors and a small counter space. One of the sinks is handicap accessible. Mounted on the wall is a changing station, as well as an electric hand dryer. Toilets are located on the opposite wall in the upper bathroom and down a hall in the lower building. Fresh water is available for those camping in sites without hookups at spigots dispersed throughout the entire camping area. A large stainless steel sink is provided at the restroom facility and is designated for washing dishes, as dishwashing is prohibited in the bathroom sinks. Also, this large basin keeps food scraps and soapy gray water away from campsites. A single children's play area is centrally located for the entire campground and is dated. However, it was frequented by young people regularly during my stay, despite consisting only of a set of swings for older children and a separate set of swings for smaller toddlers. Wi-Fi is available for a fee, I think it was $4 a night, but only to those sites closest to the ranger station. Similar to the playground area, the RV freshwater and dumping station is centrally located on a small loop road between the upper and lower sections. The dumpster and recycling location is situated just off the main road towards the exit of the campground. Camden Hills Campground also has a section which is earmarked for those campers who are interested in horseback riding, bring your own horses, and caters, in the winter, to snowmobiling, bring your own sleds. Just a short 10 or 15 minute zip from the campground down Route 1 takes you through the humble seaport town of Rockport, Maine. If you decide to head down to the harbor, maybe to view the old lime kilns, you'll find a stone statue commemorating who is arguably the most famous harbor seal. I looked it up, and Google's AI told me so. Therefore, it must be true. For almost 25 years, Andre entertained tourists and locals alike with his ability to perform more than 100 tricks. Although I never personally saw him in action, I am certainly familiar with his fame. Andre's trainer was Harry Goodridge. On a regular basis, Andre and Harry would entertain throngs of onlookers with free shows. People came despite no advertising and no agenda other than to bring joy to those who came to watch. At the end, a donation was requested to help defray costs, but it was more like a tip than a fee. Harry was married with a wife and 5 children. He was a tree surgeon and harbor master. He'd often adopt wounded or abandoned animals and nurse them back to health and return them to the wild. Some would choose to hang around, which was okay with the Goodridge family. In the late 1950s, Harry took up salvage work on the side by skin diving. He had discovered that he could adopt young abandoned harbor seals and train them to accompany him on dives. In 1961, he came across a young pup, Harry's third, that had been apparently orphaned. Naming him Andre for a dolphin trainer at Marineland in California, the young seal was destined to become far more famous than his namesake. Harry soon discovered that Andre the seal was a quick study and attracted crowds near his pen in the harbor around feeding time. Putting together a routine, Harry also discovered that Andre loved to perform. When the summer season ended, Andre was released back into the wild, but he would be in Rockport Harbor in the spring, not having traveled any great distance. As a matter of fact, the summer sensation would make a nuisance of himself with the local fishermen in their boats in the fall and winter. Concerned for Andre's well-being, by the early 1970s, Goodridge had contacted the New England Aquarium to see if they'd house Andre for the winter, to which they agreed. As the frosty weather wound down in early 1974, the aquarium had determined that Andre was able to survive in the wild and decided to let him go into Boston Harbor, with Harry standing by telling his buddy, "Go home, Andre." Then Goodridge held his breath for several days, but Andre made the 175-mile trip back to the small town on the Midcoast of Maine. This process was repeated for another 5 more years with the New England Aquarium and 4 with the Mystic Aquarium in Connecticut. Sometimes it would be as long as 6 days, but the Rockport Rockstar always returned home. By the late 1970s, television stations had determined that Andre's trip was newsworthy. That summer of 1986, Maine's most eligible bachelor had apparently gotten into a fight with another male and went missing for a month. Harry waited to hear word and checked some seal cadavers he'd been told about. Then, in July, he was notified that a seal had washed up along a remote section of Rockport's shore. Goodridge, along with a local vet, was able to positively identify the world-renowned celebrity from his scars. Andre had become such an attraction that in 1978, the town of Rockport erected a stone edifice which was unveiled to the public by Andre himself. Recently refurbished, it displays a larger-than-life harbor seal, sunning himself on a perch watching over Rockport Harbor, Andre's Harbor.